please welcome to this Changemakers conference, Advocate Thulisile Madonsela.
Thank you, Program Director. If I ever need a PR manager in my next job, I know where to look. What a remarkable morning. After listening to the speakers that have spoken before me, I've been wondering whether you still need any words. You will agree with me that we have been informed, we've been inspired, we've been energized, we have been wizened this morning. Thanks, Terry and Lead SA, for creating these opportunities and for playing your part in leading this country to the South Africa we want or the South Africa we yearn for. The Constitution was indeed going to be a bridge to the South Africa we wanted to become. And for us to get there, we needed to lead ourselves to move from where we were to where we want to be. And initiatives such as this are playing a part in making sure that that journey of moving from where we were to where we need to be takes place. I've decided that this morning I'm going to engage you on about 7 points. The first one is on the importance of Lead SA and just leadership in our time. The second point will be on making a difference, and I will give an example of that. And whoever is controlling the slides, can we go to the outline of presentation? Or is it me? Oh, I didn't realize. Thank you, sir. Oh, I thought this was a decoration. No, I'm joking. Okay. Right, okay. I finally figured it out. I apologize about that. The second point will be about making a difference. The third point would be about leadership versus having a title, where I'm talking about true leaders aren't made by titles. The fourth point would be the difference between people who aim for justice and those who aim for just us. And the fifth point will be about leadership and followership, simply because at times people ask, are you a follower or a leader? And I'll be making a point that you can't lead if you can't follow. Right, and the sixth point will be on millennials rising. I think that's a topic that has been discussed over and over again, and I hope it's not going to be too boring. The last point would be about winning and not whining as part of getting to where we want to be, which is the world we yearn for or the South Africa we want. As I said, Lead SA is playing an important role, and that role has become even more important today. We always needed to lead ourselves from where we were to where we want to be. And the Constitution was a bridge, and like all bridges, if you step on the bridge and stay there and not move forward to the other side of the bridge, you will achieve nothing. But the importance of initiatives such as Lead SA transcend the constitutional journey. I hope you will agree with me that we're living in turbulent times. As a nation, as a continent, as a world, there is some turbulence. And that's a contradiction because we live at a time where we've never been so conscious of the interconnectedness of humanity than we are right now. Because of globalization, we understand that what happens in Syria is going to affect me. Whatever happens in northern Nigeria with Boko Haram and Chibok girls and things like that has implications for our lives. What happens in Brazil has implications for our lives. Yet, despite that consciousness of our global, our interconnectedness and the reality of globalization, particularly as facilitated by the digital age, we have become an extremely troubled world. And in the world where we do, this troubled world has a lot to do with people in our communities who don't feel integrated, who feel dislocated, who feel they don't form part of that circle of life, young Mr. Biko. They feel sometimes that they have no vested interest in what's happening. If you look at Vuwani, the picture that you can see there is a school burning in Vuwani. And somebody's going to burn a school in their community, they don't feel that that's an asset. The Deputy Pub Protector had to go and quell violence in another community in Northwest. They had burnt a school and they had burnt a clinic. And we thought, if you burn a clinic, maybe if you burn a school, would say because you dropped out of school and you don't want the others to continue with school. But if you burn a clinic, whilst you are on strike yourself, whilst you are engaging in protest, you could get hurt and you'll need a clinic. So what makes people so disconnected from the world that things like that happen? And how do we get out of that? We need leadership. We need people who are not just going to sit on the sideline and saying Vuwani is burning and say Syria is burning and all of that. You need people who would say, what is it that we've done as human beings to get ourselves here? And what is it that we haven't done to get ourselves here? The people who feel dislocated in our society, why are they? It's issues of social injustice, but it's also issues of abuse of alcohol, abuse of substance abuse and things like that. But it starts mostly from the position of underprivilege and a sense of feeling you're outside that common circle of life. And leaders, as you know, are people who influence and inspire others to achieve a vision or to achieve a particular outcome. But leadership is about change. Everyone who leads is about change because you've got to move from point A to point B. If you say you have to lead people, whatever it is, even if it's literally leading people who have to follow you on a line, they have to move from one point to another. But in a figurative use of the term leadership, it's still the same as people following somebody else on a line, as you have to move them from one point to another. And at a time like this, we do need that leadership. We do need visionary, inspirational leadership that's not going to sit on the side and complain that we don't have the world we want. That's not going to sit on the side and say, what happened to the promised land? The Constitution said we were going to have an improved quality of life. The Constitution said all of us were going to have our potential freed. The Constitution said South Africa belongs to all of us. We need leadership to say, what am I doing to make that difference? And that's a leadership where you don't think of leadership and saying, this country lacks leadership, when you're meaning the president is not doing what he's supposed to do, or he's doing what he's not supposed to do. I worked in an organization once where we got to a point, it was only those early years of democracy, where I was part of a team where part of our pastime was complaining about lack of leadership. And we were the second, it was between the second layer of leadership and the third layer of leadership. But we sat there, all of us complaining about lack of leadership because we thought the one person who's the captain of the team was failing to lead us. We were failing to realize that we were failing to lead ourselves and to lead others. And it took ourselves making that discussion one day that really, when we say there's no leadership here, are we saying we are not leading? Now, if we know we're not leading, why are we not leading? I think with South Africa, it's the same thing. Initiatives such as Lead SA show that they are an example of why South Africa is a leader when it comes to many things, including constitutionalism. We have a groundbreaking constitution that has been emulated in the world because South Africans chose to lead. Our businesses have a global footprint because people do lead. It's just a question of making sure that everyone is conscientized to understand that they are capable of leading, they have a duty to lead, and it's just about stepping onto the plate. We do have examples, as I've said, in South Africa. One of the examples is a child who was born an orphan. I'm going to use an orphan even though he had a mother, because if you're born into, you're black and you were born in apartheid South Africa, your mother was regarded as a perpetual minor. Black women under the Black Administration Act were minors from birth to death. At first, minors under the guidance of their father, and when they got married, they were minors under the guidance of their husbands. That would orphan a child then, because that would mean that if your father is dead, your mother can't own the property that belongs to the family on your behalf. And if you're too young, it wasn't the case where then an uncle will then be appointed to be a trustee. Customary law was distorted in such a way that your uncle became the owner of your father's estate, not a trustee. And if your father died, your relatives then could come and take everything, including the house you live in, and chase you out of the house. Where I lived in Dlamini, I saw people being chased out of their homes, widows being chased out of their homes because of that. So this one young fellow was born an orphan in that regard. Well, no, not was born an orphan. He was orphaned at a young age. His mother took a very difficult decision to say he must go and live with his uncle, who was better off, so that he could get an education and live a better life. Indeed, he did get an education, or a part education, because in following his name, which his name was Troublemaker, when he got to university, he got involved in politics, which was seen under those days as troublemaking, and he was expelled. He then went to work in Johannesburg, where he met a man who was a leader at that stage, involved in the struggle and working in the mines. And this man took him under his wing, worked there. Whilst he was working, he studied law. It took many years to study law. I'm actually told that it took about 35 years to study law. That's a story for another day. It's about perseverance and things like that. And he lived a difficult life. Partly just studying law, he experienced racism in trying to get to university. And whilst he was at university, he experienced racism with lecturers telling him that, or at least one lecturer telling him that he would never pass his LLB degree. He should be looking for something that is more suitable for a young black fellow. In any event, what was he going to do with the LO degree? But he insisted on studying law. Eventually, he left, but he practiced law. You know those days you could serve articles even if you didn't have your degree. and then practiced as a lawyer. He practiced, but his anger about the status quo, he yearned for a different world, a world where your humanity was not determined by your color, where your ability and your character were the basis on which you were afforded opportunities and on the basis on which you were allowed to lead. So he started working for that world and unfortunately got arrested and ended up spending most of his life in jail. To be exact, 27 years in jail. You probably already know who that person is. But the important thing is about making a difference is that this young fellow chose to create the world he wanted to live in. He chose to create the world he yearned for. Instead of sitting there and whining that things were not right, he played a part in trying to create that world. Incidentally, when he died, the whole world moaned. People of all colors, all continents, communists, non-communists, conservatives, and liberals, all of them, Muslims, Christians, Jews, etc., moaned. Most newspapers led with the story of his death. And that's what happens when you choose to lead, when you choose to make a difference, rather than to sit on the sidelines just to complain. And that was Nelson Mandela. The second point I wanted to discuss with you is leadership and having a title. Most of us here, or at least maybe half of us here, have had to employ people. And I'm often fascinated when people say, we chose this person because he spoke so well. That he sold, we expected a lot more from that one, but he was not able to sell himself well. Then I asked myself, are we trying to find an orator, or are we trying to find a manager? Now, what if this other fellow was able to buy that 3-day MBA and read it very well and reproduced it very well, and the one who can do the job is not articulate, but the job does not require you. For example, you want somebody, an IT manager. That group doesn't speak that much. We went the other way. The other day, we went to listen to Bill Gates speaking. He had a marvelous message, but it was delivered more like a report, because that's Bill Gates. And there were mixed feelings about it, and you had to be somebody who's attuned to what he had to say to feel inspired. And then 2 days later, there was Charlize Theron, who presented a message, and everyone heard it. Everyone got it within seconds. So those people, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to employ the one instead of the other. Now, the other mistake we make is to say, if a person has never done anything, let's say you want a job that requires somebody to protect people. If they've never protected people, what makes you think they're going to protect people now? I don't know how many of you know the poem by James Patrick Kinney. There's 6 people trapped by happenstance who have all logs, and none of them is willing to drop it in the fire. The fire is dying, and it's cold and dark, but each one of them has reasons. A lot of them were bigotry. And the one wouldn't use their log because there was somebody from a church that was not from theirs. The other one, there was somebody from a race that didn't belong to them. The other one was historically disadvantaged, didn't want these ones who have always been advantaged to get his log again. The other one The last one, though, is an interesting one. As a fellow who had never done anything for gain. And he looked around and saw these people and said, they're not in a position to pay for my log, and I'm not going to do it. Anyway, at the end of the day, the fire dies. Now, when you're looking at leaders and people sitting around this room, you are here on a Saturday. Sometimes when people are employing people, they don't ask, what have you done other than those things, Sir, that you spoke about earlier? What have you done other than simply those things that you were going to be paid for? Because if you can't ever move an inch beyond what you're going to be paid for, it's dangerous to ask you to be a CEO or to lead an institution, isn't it? Because you're not suddenly going to volunteer your time now. You're not suddenly going to extend yourself beyond what you'll be paid for just because you have a title. And Robin Sharma has written a book, The Leader Who Had No Title. And he speaks about a cleaner. The story starts with a cleaner who cleans as a leader. The kind of person who doesn't need somebody chasing them to say, have you cleaned this corner, have you cleaned this corner? The kind of person who does their best beyond the call of duty because they believe in the purpose of the work they are doing. They believe in the purpose of the organization. They believe in contributing to a higher cause, which is a better organization, a better society, and the world they would like to live in. My view is, if somebody has never led without a title, they certainly won't lead with a title. In fact, they will diminish the power and authority of the title you're giving them. And it's important to think about that. The next thing linked to that leadership without a title is, on leaders without a title, maybe I should just go very quickly about why I have that picture. That is Oliver Tambo. The millennials, some of you millennials would never have heard about him. I love Madiba, and I think he's a great man, but unlike others, I don't believe that South Africa's Moses is Nelson Mandela. I believe Oliver Tambo is our Moses. I chose him as a symbol of leading without a title because he led an organization in foreign terrain without the support of an army, the support of the police, judges, etc. And with these people all over the world, but he was able to keep that organization together. He was able to be the head of that organization, but also to be the conscience of that organization. So he had a title as the head of that organization, but he also had to be a conscience. Albie Sachs spoke about Oliver Tambo recently, about a challenge that Oliver Tambo had where people in the ANC were turning into the people they left behind, the people who chased them away from home, because the apartheid state was sending its agents to infiltrate the organization. So the reaction was vicious, isn't it? You're selling out on us, you're getting us killed, and they reacted with the same viciousness. Oliver Tambo felt that that reaction with the same viciousness of the enemy was killing you because that's not your values. The reason you are who you are is because you want to create a better world. And by using the same tools of the enemy that you're fighting, you are becoming them, the difference being just the skin color. He then asked Albie Sachs to come to Lusaka to create a code of conduct that was going to incorporate human rights, to make sure that even if people are suspected of being sellouts, they are still dealt with an understanding that they're humans with their dignity respected, but more than anything else, in a human rights-centered way. I was about to get to this point now about leadership, about the difference between justice and just us. That terminology was invented by somebody in the Department of Justice. When we came to the department in the early years, we said that we want the Department of Justice to move from a paradigm of just us to a paradigm of justice. In that under apartheid, it was an insular state and it was looking after a small group, and even civil servants were more concerned about looking after themselves and those like them and those that could improve their fortunes. And the idea was then you want to create an institution that serves everyone. Leaders that we need today that are going to take us out of the picture that I showed you of Wani have to be leaders that are going beyond just us, that are leaders that are concerned about justice. Because just us is short-termed. If my success is about your loss, it's fine. I will succeed, but I will not succeed forever. Because as long as there is injustice somewhere, there can't be sustainable peace anywhere. And thank you. I picked these three women as examples of a leadership paradigm that is about justice operates. Charlotte Maxeke, born in 1874 and passed away in 1939. She was the first African female to get a degree, any degree of some sort. She could have looked after herself. She could have used that degree to amass wealth and to assimilate into the system. Alternatively, she could have chosen to fight for her own people. She was coming from Limpopo, the Pedi people, or she could have fought for the people in the Eastern Cape because she was married to a Xhosa man, hence Maxeke. She was Charlotte Manye when she was born. Or she could have only chosen to fight for women's rights and forget about everyone else. But she is known to have said that it is important that we advance women. It is important that we ensure justice, responsive justice to women and children, because if we improve the lives of women and children, the lives of men, including white men, will be improved as well. Her approach was, we need that world where everyone has a decent life, because that's the only world where we are all going to live in peace. Another woman who also believed that the only way we are going to be able to live in peace and prosperity is if we affirm the humanity of everyone was Olive Schreiner. Olive Schreiner was born in 1855 and died in 1920. And one of her themes was the issues of racism, the issues of sexism, just generally social justice. And one of the things that she said that I like is when she said that in any way, when we die, we all go 6 feet under, regardless of our race or gender. Then we had Helen Suzman, a lone voice in the apartheid state. She could have given up. She could have just said, I don't need this, I'm a professional, I can have a job. But she yearned for a better world, a world where there was justice for all, not just us. And she fought. She She didn't fight about Jews. She was Jewish. She wasn't concerned about the sufferings of Jews. She was concerned about human suffering as a whole. And she used her lock to try and burn the fire of to try and contribute to the fire of freedom, which eventually led to the fall of apartheid. Leaders who make a difference are also leaders who are followers. I can't imagine any leader in history, a single leader in history, who made a difference, who changed the status quo, who wasn't a good follower. I mean, in Southern Africa, you could even think of Shaka. Shaka was a very, very, very powerful leader. But Shaka was led by Ndwandwe, by a Ndwandwe fellow who groomed him and made him who he became eventually. But for me, the story of leadership and followership that I like most is a story between Mandela and Sisulu. Mandela got recruited into the struggle by Sisulu. And in his early years as a leader, he was mentored by Sisulu. Then Mandela, through the prison, the Rivonia trial, became this powerful figure with that whole quote that we all quoted when we were growing up about I have fought against white oppression, I have fought against black oppression, and etc., etc. Once he was in jail, everyone was looking up to him. But if you watch the movie, Long Walk to Freedom, or read the book, you'll see there's a point at which where Madiba was annoyed that they were being given short pants, and the Indians and whites were being given full trousers, and he wanted to fight about that. And Walter Sisulu was teaching him to choose your battles that save your energy for another day. And he allowed himself to be led by Walter Sisulu. And throughout their life, actually, there was that relationship of leader, both of them leading in different ways. And that's the whole story of leaders who make a difference, is that at times you are a leader, at times you are a follower. Sometimes it is the secretary who has to lead because they know how these things work. If you are going to insist on leading that terrain, you're going to drop the ball because they know better. So leaders who make a difference know when to follow and when to lead. But leaders who make a difference also know that they are not perfect. So part of them being followers is because leaders know that they're not perfect, that they make mistakes. In fact, in one book that I read recently, which was referred to yesterday by the editor of Fair Lady, which just pricked my memory about it, Startup Nation, that book talks about why it's important for you to embrace failure, not to feel ashamed of failure if you are going to lead in a manner that makes a difference. That you shouldn't, because if you're afraid of failure, you're afraid of the shame that goes with failure, sometimes you just do nothing and rather suffer the shame of doing nothing. So leaders who make a difference are the ones who know that they can make mistakes. But they also then know that there will be other people that can correct them when they make mistakes. And one day, in 2000, when public protector-like institutions got together here in South Africa, this is what President Nelson Mandela said. He was former president by then, said about public protectors. He said, even the most benevolent of governments are made up of people with all the propensities for human failings. The rule of law, as we understand it, consists in the set of conventions and arrangements that ensure that it is not left to the whims of individual rulers to decide on what is good for the populace. The administrative conduct of government and authorities are subject to scrutiny of independent organs. This is an essential element of good governance that we have sought to have built into our new constitutional order. An essential part of that constitutional architecture is those state institutions supporting constitutional democracy. Among those are the Public Protector, the Human Rights Commission, the Auditor General, the Independent Electoral Commission, the Commission on Gender Equality, the Constitutional Court, and others. He proceeded to say the following: "It was, to me, never reason for irritation, but rather a source of comfort when these bodies were asked to adjudicate on actions of my government and office and judge against it. One of the first judgments of our Constitutional Court, for example, found that I, as president, administratively acted in a manner they would not condone. From that judgment, my government and I drew reassurance that the ordinary citizens of our country would be protected against abuse, no matter from which quarters it would emanate. Similarly, the Public Protector had on more than one occasion been required to adjudicate in such matters." The approach from Nelson Mandela was the approach that says, I make mistakes not because I'm a bad person, I make mistakes because I'm human. In trying to be perfect, in trying to perfect life, I will make imperfect decisions. But when somebody corrects me, I will correct those. And he responded to the Public Protector the way a wise chief responds to a makatsi. A makatsi, again, you have the chief as the big leader, and you have a makatsi as an aunt who's sort of an advisor. But on certain matters where the makatsi whispers truth to the chief, a wise leader or a wise chief listens, and a foolish one ignores that advice at his own peril. And that's the point, that leaders who make a difference are followers. In that particular case, the leader who knows his authority, who knows his power, will allow himself to be led by somebody who's either below him or somebody who is horizontal to him. That's where you talk about horizontal leadership, where you don't always only take orders or advice from above you. Leaders who make a difference today do so despite age. In the past, at least in biblical terms, people marvel at the fact that Jesus led at the age of 33. And the Pharisees were very unhappy with that approach, that a 33-year-old could tell them what to do. But today, often companies are started by 17-year-olds. We had our colleague here who started his at 22. The millennials are making a difference at a young age, and a good example right now, oh sorry, I keep forgetting this. The millennials recently reminded us that they know what South Africa is promised by the Constitution. They yearn for that South Africa, and they want us to hasten the pace of achieving that South Africa. And because our own pace and our own consciousness was a little behind, they moved to the front and took the action. Hence, we saw a Fees Must Fall movement, a Roads Must Fall movement, and many other things that were about social injustice must fall. I take no view about whether fields must fall or roads should have fallen, but the essence of the messages from this movement is social injustice can no longer be tolerated. And as long as we tolerate that social injustice, we're allowing instability. Because everyone wants a decent life, and the Constitution promises everyone a decent life. And if we're too comfortable in our own spaces, people are going to move forward and push us to give that decent life a chance. And the interesting thing about the Fees Must Fall movement was that it wasn't just the poor students fighting in this fight. We saw here in the Western Cape children of lecturers, people of senior people, people of company executives at the forefront of the Fees Must Fall, and which confirms a study done by the World Economic Forum that the millennials tend to be sensitive about issues of social injustice. And they want to do something. And I can confirm that I've got two young ones, a little bit older than your typical millennial. But the one thing that bothers them every day is social injustice. And when my daughter left one of those very cushioned universities to go to the University of Pretoria, she was horrified on her first week of university to realize that there were students that were sleeping in toilets and libraries, because the scholarship only pays for the fees and it doesn't care where you sleep and what you eat. And she and others started to do something about it. And those are basically leaders who make a difference, are people who are uncomfortable with the status quo. And the millennials are particularly uncomfortable about social injustice. Leaders who make a difference take things into their own hands. They don't wait for others. And I thought what we have there is Miss Deaf South Africa. As society, we have grown meaningfully in South Africa about creating an inclusive society. Opportunities are being created for everyone, regardless of their human packaging. But when it comes to people with disabilities, we're still lagging behind the ideals in our Constitution. So now people with disabilities could sit there and whine about the fact that we are slow in integrating them into society. But many of them are not doing that. They are taking whatever opportunities that are available and making a difference. And the Miss Deaf South Africa is just one of those examples where you can see people transcending the culture of whining and making a difference. I chose Miss Deaf South Africa because it's not just deaf people who are working there, it's people who are also not disabled, joining hands with people from the disability community to make a difference, to give people an opportunity to lead, to harness their potential, to make sure that freed potential of every person, which is promised by the Constitution, is something that is done first. Leaders who make a difference, delivering the world we yearn for, as I have indicated, have transcended the problem of whining. If they complain, they provide solutions. Madiba said the following about what we are doing to bring the world we want to live in. He said, to raise our country and its people from the morass of racism and apartheid will require determination and effort. As a government, the ANC will create a legal framework that will assist rather than impede the awesome task of reconstruction and development of our battered society. So the idea was creating space so that everyone in our society can play a part in moving us to the South Africa we want to become. Our constitution, on the other hand, has a preamble that, among other things, promises to lay the foundation for a democratic and open society in which government is based on the will of the people and every citizen is equally protected by law, improve the quality of life of all citizens, and free the potential of each person. And of course, as we free the potential of each person, we need everyone to play a role. And leaders that are going to be honored today as change makers, and leaders who are honoring themselves today as change makers, are those who are going to make sure that we deliver this improved quality of life fast. Somebody I listened to yesterday said that if you want this improved quality of life, the first responsibility you owe, if you're a human being in South Africa, is to improve your quality of life. Isn't that great? Because then we stop whining. So you improve it by any little means you can, and then if you can't help others, help others. Even if the help that you can provide is just very little, it takes few drops of water or many drops of water to create an ocean, but each drop of water alone might think it's too small to make a difference, but make that difference nonetheless. Madiba, in ending, says that it is what we make of what we have, not what we are given, that separates one person from another. This picture is from the funeral of Madiba. It tells us about the attitude that he had, which was make a difference wherever you are. If you want a particular way of life, play up your part in creating that way of life. If you yearn for a particular world, be the first to take the step to move society towards that world. But you're not going to be able to achieve it alone. So you've got to play your part, but ultimately, together, we will then create that sea that moves us from the South Africa we rejected to the South Africa we yearn for, from the world that is troubled today to the world we yearn for. And the world we yearn for is in our collective hands. Thank you, Lead SA. Thank you to all of you.